What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we got Guillermo of the almighty Angelus Apatrida. So great to talk to you. Thank you for your time today.
Hey, Alex, thanks to you. Thanks for your time. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a great time to be talking with you guys today because we're celebrating the 20th year anniversary of the band Angelus Apatrida. You're releasing this self-titled album now. Is there a specific reason why you decided to make this a self-titled album to celebrate the 20th anniversary of it? Was that like a preconceived idea?
Yeah, well, that's let's say that it's kind of chain of consequences because in the beginning it was formally it was supposed to be an EP in the beginning of 2020. We were touring a lot and we didn't have enough time for entering the studio, so we were planning to record an EP to, let's say, celebrate this 20th anniversary of the band playing together since we were really young kids. Um, but then all this pandemic shit started, so all the plans went to hell. So we had to reinvent ourselves, and then we decided to keep on composing more music. And at the end of the summer, we found ourselves with a complete album, a complete LP, and we worked on the studio. We worked with Zeus, and we have almost the cover, but we didn't know what to call how to call the the album. So it was the last thing that we decided. So since all this happened, and like every band has their own self-titled album, we thought that it might be a good opportunity for us to make our own self-titled album, especially because of what we lived all this past year. And of course, making some jokes with the name because we know that Angelus Apatrida is quite difficult name to pronounce and of course to remember. So we said,
So I've
okay,
learned.
it's not only going to be yeah, so it was kind of funny with this. Actually, we decided to put it in the artwork of the cover as well, like with the international symbols. So now everybody can pronounce it correctly, and of course, and the most important thing to remember the name because we know, especially for non Latin based languages like Spanish or French, even English, because in English language got some Latin influence just a bit. But for example, for German people, it's impossible for them to pronounce the word apatrida. It's hilarious. So we decided to make this after listening to an interview from Mile Petrosa from Creator that he was not able to pronounce the word not in 5 minutes. So it's like, okay, let's make it easy for our German fans, of course.
That thank God for our German fans. My family's German, so it's good to know. I'll recommend this album before the rest of the catalog.
Yeah, man. I know. I mean, it's quite funny. For example, for us, I think for Spanish people, German language is one of the most difficult for us to learn. So it's fair enough. Like they're now very good pronouncing some Spanish words as well.
Mhm. Now, in terms of the sound of this album, being that you released the first single, Bleed the Crown, do you think that in terms of its sound, it's going to be similar in vein from what we heard on albums such as Cabaret de la Guillotine or Hidden Evolution or The Call or Clockwork or anything like that? Or is this almost kind of like a new beginning in a way for the band?
Yeah, totally. I think it's kind of a new beginning, but especially because we started working right now with Zeus. We've been working for the last four records with Daniel Cardoso. He's the drummer of Anathema. And since we changed the beat, the tuning for this record, and we decided to got a new mixer and mastering like Zeus. I think it's like a new beginning, but of course everything is the same. We're the same guys, the same band, the same way of composing music. But and at the same time, I think that a lot of things changed. That working with new people uh, made us like it's yeah it's totally like a new beginning, of course. So I'm not sure if you've been able to listen to the whole album, but definitely it sounds, in my opinion, quite better than the previous albums. Much more natural and organic. At the same time, it sounds much powerful. and I mean, I can be more happy about how it's sounding right now. So yeah, definitely it's like a new beginning for that, and it makes even more sense for the title of the album actually.
Yeah, I've noticed that every time a band puts out a self-titled album, it usually like represents like a maybe a change in the band. Like we've seen it with Metallica, we've seen it with Suicide Silence, we've seen it with Avenged Sevenfold. It almost seems like every time a band releases a self-titled album, there is almost kind of like a chain of events that lead up to it being self-titled.
Yeah, yeah, it could be. And as I told you before, it came a bit naturally. Like, no, it was nothing premeditated. It was nothing that we were thinking about to do in the past. But it makes a lot of sense right now. But I have to say that normally, and don't get me wrong, some bands when they try to do this change in their music with the self-titled, normally they change a lot, and I think that we changed for the better.
Yeah.
The change was something natural, and we became more aggressive, more a faster band and a harder band in that way. And I'm very proud that finally one of my favorite musical influences, which is hardcore and punk, came up with this album. Thanks. I think it's because we just changing the tuning half step down, and it made me being able to sing in a more aggressive way, and of course at the same time I can go back to this high pitch heavy metal screams as well, but I'm very comfortable singing in this way. So I think that the change is for, in my opinion, for better. And but if when you will listen, when you will be able to listen to the whole album, you will realize that the essence of the band, the basics of Angelus Apatrida is still practically the same. We're still a heavy thrash metal band, like always.
You mentioned you take inspiration from hardcore punk, and I've noticed like a lot of thrash bands have done that. I never understood though like the difference between hardcore punk and heavy metal because I feel like they're both very aggressive and brutally honest forms of music. Do you feel that there's a big difference between hardcore punk and heavy metal?
No, actually, I think that both music genres comes from the same side. At least it's the way I understood. I understand this. Since I was a kid, and the first time I heard heavy metal music, the first time I heard Iron Maiden, when it was my first time favorite band. When I was 8 years old, I was listening to after Iron Maiden. I started to listen a lot of different bands at the same time. I was listening to Iron Maiden, Sepultura, Creator, Suicidal Tendencies, Pantera. I was listening to even bands like Soundgarden or Pearl Jam or Nirvana, No Effects. I was listening to Agnostic Front. I don't know. For me, everything was the same. So I think this is why I was always much more interested in the Bay Area thrash metal than in the German thrash metal, because for me it was more important that crossover hardcore punk wave of the American thrash metal than the more dark and like more satanic way of the European thrash metal. So in my opinion, it's very important, and for me are kind of the same, because it's like rebel music is music for freedom, for unity, and I think that nowadays it makes even more sense now. So yeah, for me, it's I'm more comfortable with that kind of heavy metal and the hardcore punk scene as well.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed a lot of metal musicians have started off with punk rock. Like I know that Randy from Lamb of God is more in the vein of punk rock. I know that Derek Green of Sepultura is pretty much grew up on like Midwest hardcore. So it almost seems like hardcore and punk is always like the gateway drug into people starting metal bands.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as I tell you, here in Spain, it's not exactly not the same, of course. And when I started listening to music, it was in the early '90s, and we came from a dictatorship, from a fascist dictatorship. So everything came quite late here.
Hmm.
When all the rest of the world was enjoying a lot of incredible punk bands, here in Spain was very difficult to even listen to the Beatles, for example. So you can imagine, and everything came so late here in Spain. But I think that we made it in a right way, and actually we have in Spain a very great and intense punk scene. there are a lot of bands singing in Spanish, and they're of course a super combative and aggressive punk music here. But in my opinion, that was the way I wanted to make a band when I was a kid. So I remembered when 20 years ago we started playing together. We were covering our favorite bands, and we were playing Sepultura. But at the same time, we were playing Metallica or Megadeth. But we were playing punk rock bands as well. I remember I was playing some NoFX songs as well, or the Noxty Front, that is one band that I fucking love. And since every year I was growing and discovering more music and opening more my mind, and of course thanks to internet, I was able to listen to I don't know, thousands of new sounds and new bands for me that I was not able to find in my hometown, because actually I live in a very small city. We only had one record store, and not everything was available here in this record store. So it was very, very difficult to find all the music that I started to discover years later. So yeah, I'm very thankful for that, and I think it's one of the most important things for our music, that it really influenced us all during these years.
And I think when live shows come back after this whole thing, punk rock and heavy metal is going to take over the world because there is no better time for pissed off music than now, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point of the new album of Angelus Apatrida. Is the most angry, is the angriest album we ever composed, and I think it's time for that. But at the same time, I think it's time for remember what heavy metal and what punk rock and hardcore music is about. It's about unity, and it's about yeah, it's about unity and tolerance, and it's something that it's really missing in the last months, I think.
Mm. Do you feel that like your other albums like Evil Unleashed or Give 'Em War or Clockwork or any of that, like do you think that would you say that that had that but not as forced, you would say, or maybe not as prevalent? Do you feel like the self-titled album is basically like the album that you would recommend people just getting on board with you to listen to?
Yeah, yeah, of course, and because especially the first two albums, they were self-financed and self-produced. We were so young, and we have no experience. And, we didn't know nobody here in Spain to help us having that kind of experience. Because in Spain during the 2000 decade, everything was all the heavy metal, classic heavy metal, and power metal music, just singing in Spanish. So nobody gave a fuck about thrash metal bands, and of course nobody gave a fuck about bands, Spanish bands singing in English. So we didn't have any help from anybody. So we decided to record everything by ourselves. So of course they are like non-professional albums, and I mean it's not exactly the same. So every year and every album that we record, we try to improve ourselves and try to make it the best we can. And especially after Clockwork, when we signed it to Century Media Records, and we were able to know professionals of the music industry all over the world. And it was the first time we were going outside Spain and experimenting with in other countries with other bands speaking in English. For example, was my first time in my life that I spoke in English publicly. It was in 2010, so you can imagine.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's everything went so fast, but at the same time, it was so slowly for us. And we were the very first band doing what we were doing. We were the first band in Spanish history to sign to a worldwide deal with a label like Century Media. It was the We were the first band in Spanish history to start touring all over the world, not only Spain. So everything was we were the first band for discovering everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
of course, I would recommend the last album, like the best presentation card for the band, of course, because this is what we are right now. And if you come to a show, this is what you're gonna expect.
Yeah.
But of course, we got our history. And we got a story to tell, and we got more albums, and they were recorded in other situations. And of course, if you like the band, I think that you will love the previous albums as well. But yeah, definitely this new album, of course, is the perfect presentation if you don't know the man.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Evil Unleashed, what's great about that, because you mentioned like your punk rock and like hardcore background, and you bring up like it all came full circle with that, because with the first two self-produced albums, it really does have like a punk rock vibe to it, very raw, very DIY, very like nothing to hide sort of thing. And that's not to say that the other albums don't have that, but like I feel like your first album is like the most punk rock because of how raw that it is.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And actually, there is a story behind the first album because in 2003 we were supposed to sign with a Spanish label, and we recorded this album already in 2003. But the guy was a totally an asshole, and he tried to cheat us, and he stole the master, and imagine we were just kids, like 17 years old kids, and we were lost in a sea of snakes, like nobody was helping us. We didn't know what to do. So the last communication we had with this guy was an email saying that we will cut his throat. It's like, okay, you motherfucker, you gave us our album back, or we will go to Madrid and we will kill you, motherfucker.
Well,
But we never got an answer back.
okay.
So it was a really, really tough time. So we talked with our families, we talked with our friends, and everybody was doing like a real crowdfunding, like nowadays bands do on internet. But it was with our family, like making a collect and trying to record this album again. So finally, in 2005, we were able to record it again, and it was self-produced by ourselves. And this motherfucker was in the shadows, and the day before we were supposed to release our own album, he released that master at the same time. So it was a complete chaos. And wow, well, it was a very, very tough times. And so we decided we will never hear again about someone telling us to sign a record label. No, we didn't want to do nothing with the music industry until Century Media came,
Yeah.
because it
Well,
was quite
Century
different,
Media,
of course. But he,
Century Media,
yeah,
I think is a
exactly.
great label because they really like what I love about Century Media is that they have a very diverse roster. Like they'll have bands like Lacuna Coil or Fozzy or Buck Cherry or something like that, but then they'll have like bands like As Heavy as You Guys or Aborted or like Dark
Yeah.
Tranquility. So like it almost seems like, and I mean they've been signing like a lot of new death metal bands such as Hideous Divinity and Nasty and Lorna Shore and Vitriol, like, and they've been signing death metal bands like crazy now. So Century Media always seems to be the label to really have your back.
Yeah, yeah, of course, and it happened. They let's say they discovered us like in the movies. You know, we were playing in Madrid for one of our first times in 2008, and it was like being in the right moment in the right place, because we were playing a very, very shitty show. But there were two guys from Century Media, one guy from Spain, another guy from Germany, and they were attending the show, and they loved the band. And after the show, they left. A card with a phone number which said call me, and it was from Century Media Records. And I remember being in the backstage and I was crying, like, guys, this is real, so it was like, what the fuck is going on? So it took me like 1 week to call because of course I never spoke in English in public, so it was very difficult for me. But it happened that the guy was from Spain, actually. And then we met all the people from Century Media, and it took 1 year to finish the contract and sign to them. And we discovered just amazing people, and they live for heavy metal. They are all metalheads. I mean, they are not people with a suit and a necklace. They are real heavy metal fans, and they believe in taking young bands and bringing them, like they did with Moonspell in Portugal, like they did with Lacuna Coil in Italy. They wanted to do the same with Angelus Apatrida in Spain, and actually they did it, because luckily we now in Spain we are a big band there. So, and now the challenge is try to push the band for the rest of the world. So we're very, very happy that our our ways were crossed, and we found each other, because we're really happy. It's going to be already the fifth album with Century Media Records, and we can be more happy working with them, of course.
And I just have one more question regarding like your songwriting process, because I feel like, having all of your elements of thrash and hardcore and punk and all this, for you particular as a songwriter, in order to get like inspired to write, does inspiration sometimes come out of nowhere, or do you need to like be in a certain place or be in a certain mood in order for songwriting to happen?
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter the place, but of course it does matter the mood and the situation. I mean, I really love to write about things around me. Normally, like to make songs about social issues and things that happen to my family, to my friends, or things I see on TV. And especially this year, 2020 was. A really fucked up year, of course, and what's in all the news and what was happening all over the world with the pandemic and the people going crazy, not only in the United States all this summer, but of course in Europe and in Spain. Uh, yeah, it was like every day I have something new for writing, you know. So, and on the other hand, my girlfriend, she's a nurse and she works in two different hospitals in the intensive care units, and especially in the very first months of the pandemic, she was living very very hard times, and it was complete chaos here in Spain. I think it was one of the worst countries punished by the pandemic in the very first months. I mean March, April, and May. So every day was a kind of drama here because the poor girl, she was always coming home and like, uh, okay, three, four, five guys more died alone, blah blah blah. So watching this and watching all what's happening all over the world is yeah, it's all the motivation and all the influence I got for writing the lyrics of this new album. But in the past, I tried to focus on the same, you know, things that really pissed me off, or maybe a book or maybe a movie that I really like and I want to talk about. But normally, all the situations around me or in the world, surrounding the world, are more than enough for writing lyrics.
Yeah. Well, it's really strange too, because like people were talking about this, like I feel like now is the time to get creative, because like all this negativity, we're surrounded by negativity right now in the world that we're in with the pandemic and the unrest and the uncertainty. Like there's anxiety everywhere you look, and it almost seems like the only way to escape it is through creativity. And really, when I listened to the self-titled album, like it really had that sort of method of like escape, listening to songs like Bleed the Crown or The Age of Disformation or Childhood's End or We Stand Alone. It almost seems like that it has that pissed off energy executing in a healthy way.
Yeah, actually, yeah, and every time I listen to the album nowadays, normally when we finish an album, I stop listening to it for a couple of months, something, but I still nowadays I'm still listening to some songs because it reminds me of the days I was reading, writing the lyrics and composing the music as well, and it's really full of energy, really, and I really hope that people gets the message and gets the feeling because. It's I think it's the first time that I really I can believe myself in my own lyrics. I mean, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen in the past, but of course, it's the first time in my life that I can get impressed by my own music, and of course, don't get me wrong, I don't pretend to be not pretentious at all. It's something about passion and about feelings of this. So yeah, please check it out, and everybody just check this out because I think it's like raw power and full of energy and of course it's much better to get all these bad emotions during the past months and put it together in creativity than doing something worse like other people are doing on the streets.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for delivering a soundtrack. I think a lot of people here in the United States are very much going to relate to this album too. So thank you for giving us music to be the soundtrack to how we overcome this turmoil.
Yeah, yeah, man. Wow, thanks. I'm super happy being here telling all this. So it's my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Angelus Apatrida. Be sure to check out the self-titled album coming out via Century Media on February 5th. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.